Hello and welcome back to the channel. LC here today to dabble in some of those party favors everyone seems to enjoy at the soiree. You know, them perkies. Today we'll be discussing what are the best perks in Multiversus and how to best utilize them to get the edge on your opposition. As usual, if you're new here, make sure you drop a like and a sub. Let's see if we can get 1k likes on a sub. It definitely helps with the algorithm, so I appreciate it, guys. Perks are a pretty interesting concept in the world of Multiversus and can completely upend the way a single character or a team operates and change game plans as a collective when stacked. As we've seen within the last few tournaments that have taken place, there are some very clear favorites that have rose to the top, so let's examine just exactly why that is. Okay, so to start this off with, we'll break this down into 3 different categories: offensive, defensive, and utility-based perks. Character perks are going to be almost entirely dependent on the current playstyle that you're utilizing, and if you're currently in singles or doubles, so we'll save that for another guide in the future. So to start us off with offense, we have what is likely one of the game's single most damaging perks when utilized properly, that being Snowball Effect. You deal 7% increased damage against a fighter that has the highest damage, and demonstrates 15% when it's stacked. This right here is your pitch hitter, your clutch mechanic, your X factor, the way to steal victory from the jaws of defeat. Landing an attack while using this perk can definitely help you close out the final stocks with ease. Recommendation: the entire cast. Then moving on, we have Make It Rain Dog, another superb offensive perk which offers 20% increased projectile speed. This is immediately noticeable with certain fast projectiles such as Batarang, and extremely useful for slower projectiles like Rain Dog's Fireballs. A must-have perk for any keep away characters or characters that heavily rely on projectiles. Recommendation is going to be Batman, Tom and Jerry, Bugs, Rain Dog, and Velma. And then jumping over to Hit 'em While They're Down, somewhat of a niche perk that reaches its full potential when paired with characters who specialize in any type of debuffs. If you can find a way to keep your opponent constantly debuffed, the damage will quickly stack up. Recommendation is going to be characters like Velma, Batman, Tom and Jerry, anybody that specializes in any type of debuffs. And to close us out on offensive perks, we have 2 perks that are absolutely dominating the meta right now, starting with Ice to Beat You. This causes your team's projectiles to deal 1 stack of ice if they knock an enemy back. This is doubled to 2 stacks of ice if your ally also stacks a perk. And while on the surface this seems like it's going to be super niche, with the current meta of both Bugs Bunny and Velma running absolute wild, you'll quickly find your opponent's movements being gimped severely if they get hit by a number of projectiles, allowing you to easily pounce in and deal very heavy damage. So Ice to Beat You really can slow down the momentum, and if you keep having them in ice, it's going to really slow down their approach and their ability to really evade you. And moving on to the polar opposite, that's Flammable Dog. This allows your team to ignite an opponent if you've already knocked them back with the projectile and successfully followed up with a melee attack. Again, this sounds super situational, but you'd be surprised how many times this actual situation will naturally occur throughout matches, and having an opponent constantly within the ignited state can definitely help you stack damage rather quickly. And sliding on over to the defensive section, we have a number of terrific perks that can do a lot to enhance your survivability and effectively circumvent any enemy game plans if handled appropriately. Starting off with Back to Back. Now this is a perk that I don't hear discussed too much out there, and I certainly think it's one of the best, but only when it's stacked. Back to Back offers a 12% reduction on all incoming damage if you are near your teammate. This will likely never really be effective in just like standard free queue because you and your teammate are normally pretty separated and everything like that, but I think in tournament and in really like regimented gameplay, this can really stand out. If you really make an effort to stay right near your teammate, that damage reduction is definitely going to go a long way. But I certainly think it will have its time in the meta once it's been properly tested with time. Now, despite the fact that both Velma and Bugs got a wall of text worth of nerfs, both of them are quite prominent in the meta, and for their mere existence, plus Tom and Jerry, makes the School Me Once perk a very high consideration when fighting against these opponents. The perk allows your team to receive a projectile block buff for 2 seconds after being knocked back by a projectile, meaning it'll be harder to chain you to death with projectiles and essentially cheese you to death. Very, very useful in certain matchups. Then on to Slippery Customer, which gives your team a 10% longer dodge and vulnerability window. This is very useful for the entire cast, and especially if your playstyle is extremely dodge heavy. Those few more frames of invincibility can be the difference between life and death, and can also open in additional windows to pressure your opponents. And then jumping over to Toon Elasticity, this is possibly one of the most clutch perks in the entire game when it comes to survivability. It gives your team a 20% reduction to ground to wall bounce velocity. So if you're encountering a lot of situations where you're dying from an aerial down spike off the stage into the air and you're dying, things like, Bugs Bunny Mallet, Tom and Jerry Frying Pan, stuff like that, this can definitely help you with your survivability. Do not sleep on this one at all. I think it's definitely one of the best defensive perks in the entire game. And then to cap us all off, we have Utility, which I like to think of more of a specialized category, The perks in this category can reach anywhere between survivability from certain attacks to special attack cooldowns, so this is definitely the most versatile of all the genres. To start us off with, we have the one, the only, the legendary CoffeeZilla, which reduces ability cooldown by 10% and is a must-have perk for certain characters in a game that have very long cooldowns. Characters like Velma and Bugs Bunny, Wonder Woman, they all come to mind. What I'm waiting to see is if there's going to be a mad scientist out there that just creates a comp that's completely, revolves around cooldowns, essentially eradicating as much cooldown as possible, and just to kind of see what happens. I'm really waiting to see if somebody actually pushes it that far in the future. If you pair CoffeeZilla with something like I Dodge, You Dodge, and other perks, it can really get quite insane, so I'm really curious to see if somebody can do that in the future. Then jumping over to another dominant perk, we have Triple Jump, which gives your team an extra jump after hitting an opponent in the air. This is the de facto perk to have if you have a character that specializes in aerial tech chases like Arya, Wonder Woman, Bugs Bunny, etc. If stacked, it gives you a permanent third jump throughout the entire match. It's kind of busted, and it can really make some of those aerial chases quite insane at the highest level. And moving on to another great survivability perk, we have Tasmanian Trigonometry, which allows your team to receive 15% increased base knockback influence, which means you can survive very powerful blows that would otherwise kill you if you applied the knockback influence appropriately. If you haven't already, definitely take some time in the lab and experiment with this perk in particular. You'll find that this can definitely change your team's entire game plan. And moving on to a bit more standard affair, we have Aerial Acrobat and In a Single Bound. Aerial Acrobat gives your team 10% increased air acceleration, and In a Single Bound does 10% increased jump speed. And both of these are kind of absolutely insane when partnered with characters that already have exceptional aerial momentum, like characters like Bugs Bunny, Wonder Woman, Batman, any character that like really starts moving in the air, and when you stack it, it just gets even more silly. So if you want to start smoothing around, this is really a great perk to consider. And to cap us all off when it comes to perks, we have Last Stand, which I think is 100% slept on right now, and one day may be a go-to for tank-based comps who can take a ton of punishment before being KO'd. So Superman's my main, and there's a lot of matches where I'll be over 100% for like the vast majority of the match. So having Last Stand being able to kick in definitely can be clutch for some of those tank-type characters. This perk's ability is that it gives you 10% increased damage after reaching the 100 damage threshold, and this can give you all the momentum you need to steal games from opponents, or at the very least help you get back on equal footing with your opponent. I definitely think it's slept on. And now we'll cap us off with taking a look at what's considered to be the most powerful and dominant perks in this game currently. As usual, all of this is up for opinion, so as I see it right now, this is the lay of the land, but more importantly, what I want to hear down in the comments is what you consider to be the best perks, and what setups you're currently using. Until next time, LC signing out, peace!